Most people who own rural property have thought about it at least once. What happens if the well stops working? You push the thought away pretty quickly because, it's just always worked. Why would it stop now? Then one day it does. So this started because I came across a thread online, a forum for people with rural properties, and someone had posted asking what to do because their well had run completely dry in the middle of summer. And the responses were kind of alarming, not because people were panicking, but because of how normal it apparently was. Like people were responding with their own stories like it was just a regular thing that happens. And I realized I'd never actually thought about what that situation looks like in practice. Not just, oh, that's inconvenient, but what does your daily life actually look like when the water stops coming out of the tap and you're sitting on 5 acres in July? So I started looking into it. The first thing that surprised me is how little warning you usually get. People describe it as a slow fade. Pressure drops a little. Faucets sputter occasionally. Most people assume it's the pump, swap it out, and then a few weeks later the same thing happens again. By the time you realize it's actually the well itself, you've already burned money on a pump you didn't need. Then you call a drilling company. And this is where it gets genuinely stressful, because depending on where you live, the wait list for a new well can be anywhere from 2 months to half a year. Demand has gone up, crews are stretched, and if you're in a rural area that's been dealing with drought, when a lot of areas have, you're not the only one calling. The cost estimate when you finally do get someone out there is usually somewhere between $15,000 and $40,000, depending on depth, soil type, how far they have to go. That's just to get back to where you were before. So in the meantime, what do people actually do? From what I could find, most people cobble something together. They start hauling water in tanks, they ration heavily, showers become a calculation. Cooking, drinking water, washing, you start prioritizing in ways you never thought you'd have to. A few people mentioned filling up at neighbors' houses or driving to town. Some had stored water in barrels, but most hadn't stored nearly enough. And the thing that stood out to me reading through all of this, nobody had a real backup plan. Because why would you? A well is supposed to be the backup plan. It's the whole reason people have them. That's sort of the hidden problem here. When you're on city water, the system has redundancies built in. When you're off-grid or on a private well, you are the redundancy. And most people don't find that out until something breaks. So while I was going down this rabbit hole, I came across something I honestly hadn't heard of before. There's a category of device, some people call them atmospheric water generators, that pulls moisture directly from the air and converts it into drinkable water. The concept has been around for a while, apparently used in some military applications and in countries where water access is unreliable. But it's only recently started showing up in the consumer space in any serious way. The way it works is basically like a dehumidifier, but the water gets filtered and collected for drinking instead of just drained. It sounds almost too simple, but the underlying process isn't complicated. Air contains humidity. You cool it, the moisture condenses, you filter it, and you drink it. What's interesting is that some people have started building DIY versions of these. There are guides around it. One that came up a few times in the forums I was reading is called Joseph's Well, put together by a guy in Arizona who went through exactly the kind of situation I was describing. His well ran dry. He couldn't afford the commercial versions of these systems, which apparently run into the thousands of dollars. So he reverse engineered something simpler with parts from a hardware store. I'll be honest, when I first read about it, I was a little skeptical, because pulls water from the air sounds like something that either works great or is wildly overstated depending on your conditions. And that's the real limitation worth mentioning. These systems are heavily dependent on humidity levels. In a humid environment, they work well. In a genuinely arid desert, with very low humidity, the output drops significantly. So the idea of getting 50 gallons a day from thin air in the middle of a dry Arizona summer, I'd want to see that tested pretty carefully before I counted on it. In more moderate climates or during seasons with higher humidity, the numbers seem more realistic. The other thing is that this doesn't replace a well for a household running at full capacity. It's more of a supplemental or emergency source. For drinking water and cooking, it seems viable. For irrigation or livestock, you'd need a lot more output than a DIY unit provides. But here's where it actually starts making sense. If you're someone who already owns rural property, already relies on a private well, and has thought even once about what happens if that well fails, having a backup source of drinking water that doesn't depend on drilling, infrastructure, or a water delivery truck seems genuinely useful. Not as a primary system, but as a buffer that buys you time. Time to get on a wait list, time to figure out a permanent fix, time to not be in a full emergency the moment something goes wrong. The people it probably doesn't make sense for are renters. people on reliable municipal water, or anyone expecting it to fully replace a working water system. It's not that. But for someone who's read those forum threads and felt a quiet recognition, yeah, I've never really thought about what I'd do in that situation. It's at least worth understanding how it works. The forum thread I mentioned is long gone, but I found the Joseph's Well Guide through a few different references, and I'll leave the link in the description if you want to look into it yourself. It goes into the build process, the materials, the cost breakdown. Seems like something a lot of people have found useful just for the peace of mind of having a plan B. Anyway, that's what I found. Hopefully it's useful for someone out there who's been pushing that thought to the back of their mind.